Hello, everybody, and welcome to session 3 of the HerStory International Women's Day Summit on the 9th of March, 2026, or the 8th of March, 2026, if you are in North America. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, coming to you all the way from Melbourne, Australia. The HerStory Circle is a global platform that's dedicated to amplifying the voices of women from all walks of life. We believe in the power of storytelling to inspire, educate, and connect individuals, fostering a world where every woman's story is heard and valued. Our mission is to create opportunities for women to share their experiences, to build communities, and to drive positive change. So the International Women's Day Online Summit for 2026 is a virtual celebration, celebrating the achievements of women and exploring the challenges that they faced. Through inspiring speeches and panel discussions, the summit aims to empower women to rise through story, power, and possibility. And that's why our theme is Voices That Shape the Future. Women rising through story, power, and possibility. And we'll be focusing on the critical roles that women play in shaping the future of our world. So it's an honor for me to introduce our next speaker. Thank you so much, Dr. Lewis, for coming online and sharing your story with us. I'm going to exit. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on your platform. It is an honor and a pleasure. I am Dr. Madeline Ann Lewis, President and CEO of the Executive Women's Success Institute, and I am based in Upper Marlboro, Maryland, in the United States. And my story is why I joined the Army. Believe it or not, I joined the Army for Spain. Yes, Spain, not for patriotism, not for discipline, and definitely not for sleeping in tents. I joined the United States Army because I wanted to go to Spain. Now, before you judge me too harshly, let me explain. This all started when I lost my scholarship to Tulane University. And losing that scholarship was bad. But telling my mother, that was terrifying. Now, you need to understand a little something about my mother. She was 5 feet 3 inches, but that woman carried the authority of someone who was at least 6'5". She didn't yell, she didn't threaten, she didn't negotiate. She had a look, you know that look, that the kind of look that makes you immediately start apologizing, even if you don't know what you did yet. So I walked up to her and I told her I lost my scholarship. And then I stepped back because I was waiting for the storm. But instead, she surprised me. She looked at me calmly and said, I don't know how you're going to do it, but you're going to finish college. I'll give you 6 months to figure it out. Then she walked away. No follow-up questions, no brainstorming session, no helpful suggestions, just 6 months. And there I was standing there thinking, a hint would have been nice. Then suddenly I had a light bulb moment. I thought about, I had a friend from high school who had joined the military, and she had been stationed in Spain. She used to write to me, sending me letters telling me how amazing it was, the culture, the travel, the fun she was having. And I thought, perfect. I'll join the military. I'll get stationed in Spain. I'll hang out with my friend. The military will pay for my college. Problem solved. It was a beautiful plan. Simple, efficient, strategic. There was only one small problem. The Army had a completely different plan for my life. Because in 22 years of military service, I never once made it to Spain. Not once. The closest I got during Desert Storm, our plane stopped in Germany to refuel. That was it. That was my European vacation. Instead of Spain, I got tents, foxholes, field training, and sand. So much sand. I mean, I got sand in places sand should never be. And most of my assignments were in male-dominated units. Now, my friends back home were shocked. They used to tease me all the time. They would say, "Girl, how are you in the Army?" Because they always called me bougie. And honestly, they weren't wrong. Because there is nothing glamorous about sleeping in a tent in the desert. There's nothing cute about digging a foxhole. And there is absolutely nothing relaxing about field training. But something interesting happened during those 22 years. My mindset changed. Because when you're in an environment like that, you have two choices. You can complain or you can adapt. And the Army made sure we learned how to adapt. Let me give you an example. In basic training, every time you messed up, they made you do push-ups. Now, in the beginning, I thought, okay, this is punishment. But after a while, I realized something. Most women don't come into the military with a lot of upper body strength. So those push-ups weren't just punishment. They were preparation. Because at the end of training, there was a physical fitness test. And if you didn't pass, you were out. No exceptions. The Army's motto is adapt, improvise, overcome. Translation, get stronger or go home. But somewhere between those push-ups and the sandstorms and the promotion boards, something changed. I stopped trying to survive the Army and I started learning how to lead in it. As I started getting promoted up the ranks, something else happened. Women started coming to me. They would knock on my door and say, "Can you look at my promotion packet? How are you getting promoted? Will you help me practice for my interview board?" And at first I thought they were just asking for advice. And then I realized something much bigger. They weren't just asking for advice, they were asking for permission. Permission to step forward, permission to lead, permission to believe they belonged. And that's when it hit me. The lessons I learned in the military weren't just about surviving the Army. They were about women's power and leadership. And leadership is transferable from the battlefield to the boardroom. That realization is what led me to start my business because I wanted to help women navigate the same obstacles I faced. I wanted to help them get promoted, speak up, and reach their full potential. And the Army taught me the three things every woman needs to do that. And I call that the CAN leadership model. Because every woman in this room can. C, that's for confidence. Apply before you're ready. You know, I had to lead units made up mostly of men. Do you think I felt ready every time? Absolutely not. But confidence is not something you want to feel. Confidence is something you decide to practice. You apply for the role, you raise your hand, you walk into the room, even when that little voice in your head says you're not ready. Because here's the truth. Most men apply when they're 60% ready. Women wait until they're 110% ready. Ladies, stop waiting. Apply anyway. And A is for assertiveness. Speak, don't shrink. In the military, indecision is dangerous. You cannot whisper orders in a war zone. You cannot second guess yourself in the middle of a mission. People need clarity, and leadership requires voice. Assertiveness isn't aggression, it's ownership. It's saying, this is the direction, and then standing in it without shrinking to make others comfortable. And N, network. Build rooms that speak your name. Hard work matters, but relationships matter too. Promotions, they often happen in rooms you're not in. And someone in that room says your name. I had to learn how to build relationships, how to advocate for myself, how to connect with people who would recommend me when opportunity showed up. Because when opportunity knocks, your name needs to already be in the room. Confidence, assertiveness, network. That's how women lead. So let's go back to Spain. Remember that plan? You know, the beaches, the adventure, the fun. That was the dream. But instead, I got the desert, push-ups, promotion boards, and sandstorms. But here's the thing. Spain would have given me memories, but the Army gave me purpose. Spain would have given me a vacation, but the Army gave me a voice. Spain would have given me a trip, but the Army gave me leadership. And today I stand here knowing something I didn't know when I was 20 years old. Sometimes the plan you create is not nearly as powerful as the path that builds you. Because I never made it to Spain, but I did make it to leadership. And ladies, let me tell you something. If I can adapt in a war zone, you can adapt in a boardroom. If I can lead in the middle of the desert, you can lead in the middle of any room you walk into. And if a young woman who joined the army just trying to get to Spain can build a life of leadership, imagine what you can build when you decide to step forward. So, when you leave here today, apply, speak, build your network because you can. I want you to adapt, improvise, and lead again because you can. And that is how I made it into the army because I wanted to go to Spain. Thank you.
What an incredible story. Oh my gosh. And look at you now. I love this story because it really shows us how life can deviate your plan and take you in a completely different direction, right?
Yes, absolutely. What they say, the best laid plans always go astray.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to unpack your story in a minute. I'm going to play the video of our next speaker first, and then
Okay.
we'll have something to bounce off each other and talk about. I'll bring you on in a minute, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. Who would have guessed? I love it when women know how to morph and change and go with the flow of life. Our next speaker, again, is coming to us from the US. Thank you so much, Anna, for sending us your video.
When I was 20 years old, I was studying law and living in a tiny studio that I shared with a roommate. I slept on the mattress on the floor. One night, in the midst of studying for my exams and surrounded by stacks of law books, I picked up a pencil and started drawing a portrait of John Lennon. I don't remember exactly why I chose him. Maybe because I grew up listening to the Beatles with my dad, or maybe because his image always represented creativity and freedom to me. I'm not sure. I finished the drawing and left it on the table. My roommate walked by, looked at it, and said, "I didn't know you could draw." And without thinking, I answered, "I forgot that I could." At the time, I didn't realize how true the sentence was. As a kid, I always used to draw, all the time. My dad loved drawing portraits, and he would show me how to measure a face on an image with my thumb, and how to see shadows instead of just lines. I would buy teenage magazines and spend hours drawing Leonardo DiCaprio's face, my biggest crush at the time. Drawing was the first activity where I experienced what psychologists call flow. Hours would pass and I wouldn't notice. But somewhere around 14 or 15, that part of my life disappeared. I started focusing on other things with friends, and drawing slowly faded away. No one ever suggested that art could actually be more than a hobby to me. So when I got a scholarship to study law, it felt like the responsible path. My family struggled financially, and law promised stability. The problem was that I absolutely hated it. I remember telling a friend of mine that I had gotten the scholarship. She looked at me and said, "Law? I never thought of you as a lawyer." At the time, I thought that she was being rude. Now I realize she just saw something that I couldn't see yet. I was building a life that did not match who I was. That night, when I drew John Lennon, I realized something. It felt like I was reconnecting with a person I used to know but had lost along the way. I realized I had been living in contradiction with myself. But leaving that path, the path of security, was not easy. It meant disappointing my family. It meant walking away from the financial stability they had worked so hard to give me. And I was scared. So one day, I was walking through downtown in my small town when I saw a poster on a wall. It was an advertising of a cultural exchange program to the United States. You could live with a host family and study English for a year. I remember standing there, reading that poster, and feeling something inside of me pulling me towards that opportunity. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how real it felt. I could almost feel myself already there. Of course, it also meant moving to another country for at least a year without speaking much English and without knowing if anything would work out. A single poster on a wall made me imagine a completely different life. And once that possibility appeared, it was impossible to unsee it. Years later, I was living in San Francisco and sharing my artwork on Instagram when a company that hosted paint and sip events reached out to me. They asked if I would be interested in teaching art at their events. Even though I felt completely unprepared, I said yes. And that opportunity opened doors I didn't even know existed. It led to many new opportunities, including starting my own company, bringing art and creativity experiences to teams inside organizations in Silicon Valley. Fast forward to years later, when I started hosting creative retreats, I began speaking with hundreds of women who were interested in coming. Many of them were in midlife. Their lives were changing in big ways. Some had gone through a divorce, some had lost their partners, some had children living home. And almost all of them said the same thing: I feel lost. But as I kept having these conversations, I started noticing something interesting. They weren't actually lost. Most of them knew exactly what they cared about, what they value, and what they wanted more of in life. The real problem was something else. Their lives had been built for a version of themselves that no longer existed. Their environment had not caught up with who they were becoming. I saw this clearly during one of our retreats in Bali. We were doing a poetry workshop with a Balinese poet. There were 8 women sitting in a circle. The exercise invited them to write about what they saw in a collage they had created the day before. When they started reading their poems out loud, you could feel the energy in the room change. There was vulnerability, there was courage. Women were sharing things they had not said out loud before. And there was something else. Women who had just met just a few days before were suddenly holding space for each other in a way that felt very real. In that moment, it became very clear to me what was happening. The retreat environment had created the conditions for inner parts of them to emerge. And it made me realize something about my own story too. Sometimes we think we have lost ourselves, but maybe we haven't. Maybe we have simply been living in environments that no longer nurture who we are. When that happens, people often try to solve the problem by thinking harder. They analyze themselves, they search for answers, they try to figure themselves out. But in my experience, clarity often appears when we change the conditions around us. New environments interrupt old patterns. When you step outside your normal environment, something interesting happens. The routines that shaped who you are every day loosen their grip. The roles you have been playing for years start to soften. Suddenly, you can see your life with a little more distance. You can see what still fits and what doesn't. Now, of course, someone might ask, what happens when you go back home? Won't you just return to the same environment you had before? Yes, but you won't return as the same person, because the purpose of stepping into a new environment is not to escape your life. It's to give you a chance to experience parts of yourself that had been forgotten. And once you experience those parts again, it becomes very difficult to pretend they don't exist. You come back with information. You start noticing what still belongs in your life and what needs to change. And those changes don't have to be necessarily big. In fact, most of them are surprisingly small. You adjust your routines, you explore new interests, you spend time with different people. You begin shaping your environment so it reflects the person you are becoming. And there's a simple way to start doing that. I like to think of it as a small reminder called ACT, ACT. A is for alter your environment, go somewhere new, even temporarily. New places interrupt old patterns. C is for change what you consume. Expose yourself to art, ideas, conversation, experiences that awaken your curiosity again. And T is for try something you once loved. Return to something that used to bring you joy before life got too busy. Visit a museum you have always wanted to see. Take a dance class. Go somewhere unfamiliar. Pick up a hobby you loved years ago. Do something that fills your heart instead of just satisfying your head. When life feels misaligned, it doesn't mean something is wrong with you necessarily. It may simply mean that the version of you that built your life is no longer the version of you who lives in it. And sometimes the fastest way to rediscover yourself is not by looking inward. Sometimes it is by stepping into environments that allow the next version of you to emerge. I often think back to that moment in the apartment when my roommate looked at my drawing and said, "I didn't know you could draw." And I answered, "I forgot that I could." Maybe you haven't lost yourself either. Maybe there are parts of you simply waiting for the chance to come back to life.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much, Anna, for being with us virtually with your presentation. Very, very inspiring to see what you've done with your life. Now, I want to share with you the day a beating from a nun gave me my voice. I discovered my life purpose when I was 6 years old. Unfortunately, it required a beating from a nun. Now, that's not something most career counselors recommend, but for me, it changed everything. I had just started school. It was 3 days earlier. I was excited. You see, my sister, who's 2 years older than me, had already started big school. So when it was finally my turn, I felt like I had been promoted into the world. This was a private Dominican convent school run by Catholic nuns. It was the most expensive school in the country. And my sister and I were the first two Black children in this school. This was in Rhodesia in the 1970s, a country living under racial segregation. Now, on that particular morning, we were playing in the most beautiful garden. There was a statue of the Virgin Mary holding baby Jesus. And at her feet was a small pond filled with bright orange goldfish. Butterflies were everywhere. Dragonflies were gliding across the water. It was just magical. I remember standing there totally mesmerized, watching the water drip from the fountain. And then suddenly someone grabbed me by the arm, lifted me off the ground, and started beating me hard. The next thing I remember, everything went black. When I woke up an hour later, I was in the school sick bay. I could hear the head nun shouting, "Why did you do that? These are the only two Black kids in the school. What is the community going to say with what you've done?" And then they gave me the punishment. I had to go into the chapel and say 10 Hail Marys and 10 Our Fathers, and my sins would be forgiven. So I sat there reciting the prayer, "Hail Mary, Mother of God." And for something about this prayer just didn't make any sense. How could Mary be the mother of God and also the mother of Jesus? So when I got home, I asked my mother. She couldn't explain it either. And then I got another beating, this time for asking all of these questions and not listening to the nuns. But something powerful happened that day. Something shifted in my little 6-year-old brain. I decided that if something didn't make sense, I would ask questions. If nobody could answer them, I would keep asking until somebody could. That day, I found my voice. But here's something interesting. That nun thought she was punishing me. What she was actually doing was activating my greatest gift. You see, all of us are born with something like that, a natural instinct, a curiosity, a talent, a voice. The previous speaker was talking about how she was reminded that she was an artist. But somewhere along the line, the world tells us to stop. Stop talking, stop painting, stop questioning, stop being difficult, stop being too much. And slowly, very slowly, people begin to silence themselves. But if you really want to know what your life purpose is, you don't need a career coach. You need to remember what you loved doing as a child. For me, it was speaking, talking, storytelling, making people laugh. Unfortunately, my teachers didn't always see it that way. I was that little girl at the back of the class, cracking jokes, making everyone laugh, and then getting detention for talking again and again and again. Fortunately, my father realized something very important. This child isn't going to stop talking. So instead of punishing me, he redirected me. He redirected my energy. He said, why don't you join the drama club? And then the debate club. And suddenly the thing I kept getting punished for became the thing I started winning awards for. By the time I was 13, I was competing in high school senior public speaking competitions against 18-year-olds and winning. But the real power of a gift is when it becomes bigger than you. When I was a teenager in Zimbabwe, I formed an all-women's theater group. We performed political plays during the Robert Mugabe dictatorship. We used storytelling to speak out justice. Later, during the AIDS pandemic that devastated Southern Africa, I wrote a play to educate people about how the virus was spreading. Because this wasn't abstract for me. In my own family, we buried cousin after cousin after cousin. 18 of my grandmother's 34 grandchildren died before I left New Zealand in 2001. So storytelling became a tool to save lives. But life has a funny way of interrupting our dreams. I moved to England to study business. I had no scholarship, I had no money. So I worked 3 jobs. At 4 o'clock in the morning, I cleaned the university's offices. During the day, I went for my lectures. And then in the evening after college, I sold music in Oxford Street in London. And at night, I cleaned the kitchens in the McDonald's next door. And I ate so much McDonald's during that period, I still can't look at a cheeseburger. And then life happened. I got pregnant. I had to leave university. The dreams paused. But something interesting happens with purpose. Even when you try and walk away from it, it keeps calling you back. You see, years later, I moved to New Zealand in 2001. One day, I was sitting in the back of a lecture theater, listening to a presentation about the movie Lord of the Rings by Peter Jackson. The speaker, who had designed the spider in the film, was talking about animation. Suddenly, this voice in my head said, "Put up your hand." Before I knew it, my hand was up in a room full of people, and I asked the most courageous question: "Can I act in one of Peter Jackson's next movies?" The room was silent. And then the speaker said, "Give me your name and email." A few months later, I was cast to act in the movie King Kong. And then I was cast to act in Avatar 1. Sometimes your voice opened doors you didn't even know existed. Eventually, I returned to what I had always been known as my calling: speaking, storytelling, and helping others find their voice. After my divorce, I created the platform HerStory, which all of you are speaking on, a global movement where women can share their stories. Today, the movement includes hundreds of thousands of women across 35 countries. And every time a woman stands up and shares her story, something extraordinary happens. People realize that they're not alone. When I was 6 years old, a nun tried to silence me. She beat me for asking questions. She thought she was punishing a child. But what she was actually doing was awakening a voice. And here is what I've learned after decades of speaking, after doing 4 TED Talks, after hearing thousands of stories from women from around the world. The world is not short of talent. The world is short of people who believe that their voice matters. Right now, somewhere in this audience, somewhere in your house, as you're sitting, listening to this interview, listening to me speaking, there is someone who has a story that can change a life, a story that can save someone, a story that can start a movement. But maybe someone once told you to be quiet. Maybe someone told you you were too loud, too curious, too opinionated, too much. But what if that thing the world tries to silence in you is actually the thing that you were born to do? Because your voice is not something you learn. Your voice is something you remember. So speak. Ask those questions. Tell that story. Because somewhere, someone is waiting for the light that only your voice can bring. So thank you for being here and sharing our second day of the HerStory Online Summit. Dr. Lewis, it's now time for me to ask you a few questions. Thank you so much for sharing
Okay.
your incredible life with us today.
It's a pleasure being here. As I'm telling you, I am honored.
So the theme seems to be quite common in all of our presentations in this session.
Mm.
You found your vocation. You were redirected from something that you thought you were going to do. You were going to Spain. There's a book that I read once called Welcome to Paris, about a woman who was pregnant and she prepared for the birth of her baby. She read all the books, she did all the exercises, and then she had a disabled baby. And she talks about how she had to learn a completely new language to deal with her disabled child. It was as if she had got on a flight and arrived in a completely different country. Something similar happened to you.
Yes.
You went in a completely different direction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, never made it to Spain, but I did make it to leadership. So, and that's what the military taught me, the leadership and be able to speak up and use your voice and, all those things that I try to teach women now about not shrinking back. Yes. Mhm.
So, how did that unexpected detour shape the leader that you have become?
Well, again, it was one of those things where having to be in a leadership position where I'm running an entire unit, and as I said, a lot of times, mostly men in those units, is that's where that confidence and the assertiveness came in because you had to I had to give them orders with confidence to, I also had to be confident enough to know that when I gave them an order, I also knew what the outcome should be,
Yeah.
as I'm giving them that order for them to take care of something or what have you. I had to also know that. So it was just such a, like you say, a different direction because I went in as a hopeful child wanting to go to Spain and also wanting to get my college paid for.
Yeah.
But I came out as a more disciplined and confident and assertive person in those respects because of the things that I learned and the lessons that I learned in the military.
As I was listening to you and reflecting on Anna's story,
Mhm.
both of you kind of reminded us that many people don't lose their purpose. They simply lose the environments that nurture them. It sounds to me like
Yeah.
the military definitely nurtured a gift that you already had in you that was
Right.
intuitive, right?
Yeah, and sometimes, like, you hear people say sometimes you don't know what you don't you
No.
don't know how much you know. And the thing of it is, that's why I said once I was in there, the mindset had to change because if that mindset hadn't changed, if I had gotten there and, because we were doing push-ups and I kept thinking, oh, this is punishment. I don't want to be here. If I kept whining and complaining about that, then that
Yeah.
mindset set shift, it would never have happened where I could look at it from a different perspective to see that it wasn't punishment, but it was indeed preparation. And because of that, that put a whole different perspective on a lot of things that I saw and that was involved with the military and how they trained. Mhm.
I love that. Yeah, often we forget our natural gifts. Anna also said that she had forgotten that she could draw when
Mhm.
she rediscovered her talent, studying law. It's a reflection of a common experience of childhood passions, that are often pushed aside in favor of practical or social acceptable career paths. Now, your mother is a
Mhm.
dynamic woman. I feel she knew that you would know how to figure
Would
this
figure
out,
it
what
out.
your
Mhm.
next direction would be.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Now,
yeah.
many women hesitate to apply for opportunities until they feel completely ready.
Right.
How can women train themselves to develop confidence through action rather than waiting for certainty?
Well, it's one of those things where, even a good example, I think, is as speakers. Sometimes when you're getting ready to go on the stage, you might have, especially if it's a huge audience, you might have butterflies. And, when you first walk on that stage, you're nervous because you kind of don't know what to expect, but you do it anyway. And
Yes.
as you start speaking, then that confidence sort of builds up and those butterflies kind of ease off. You don't feel them as much once you get into it. And I think that's where it has the part about not shrinking back, speaking up. Because if you
Mm,
don't try it or if you don't go, like I was saying, sometimes women wait till they feel they're 110% ready before they move forward with something. Sometimes you have to just jump in there, just like the men. They do it when it's 60% for them. Do it when it's 60% because along the way, you can learn what you need to learn. It's one of those things where if you're serious about it and you have the skill to even, if it caught your eye because you knew you had that skill to be able to do it, then once you get into it, you'll be able to do what you need to do, because some of it you're going to have to learn along the way anyway. It's not going to all be there.
No. Now, environment shapes identity. When Anna was talking, a key insight from her talk is that clarity often comes from changing environments. When people step outside their routine surroundings, they gain distance from the roles and expectations that previously defined them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with you being in the military, you spoke about how important it is to build networks
Mm-hmm.
where people say your name in rooms where you're not.
Right.
What are some practical strategies women can use to build their own kind of professional relationships?
Well, first of all, wherever you are, whatever your in environment that you're in, if you know that you want to not be stuck in the same place 10
Mm,
years from now,
yeah,
but you have ambition, you want to move forward, then what you need to do is find that person that's doing what you want to do, that person that you see and that's why I said when the women started coming to me, I didn't even realize anyone was even watching and paying attention to what I was doing.
yeah,
But that's what needs to be done. You look at the person that's doing what you want to do, and you get to know that person to find out, well, how are you doing this? Believe it or not, most people will share their information with you. They will give you some tidbits. They will tell you, oh, well, I maybe they did notice you at some point, to say, well, I did notice you. And what I do notice is a lot of times everybody else is doing this and doing that, and you're kind of in the background. What you
yeah.
need to do is come to the foreground a little more, to present yourself, to let people know who you are, because
Mm,
that's how it works anyway. I remember there was one organization I was working with, and I always, one of the things I always did when I got to an organization, I always wanted to do research to kind of find out some of the different things they were doing. And I
yeah.
realized that they had a recruitment team for the
Okay.
organization. And so I just went in and I wanted to find out more information about it. And once I did, then I got on the recruitment team. And so I started going out and recruiting people into the organization. And I had people ask me, well, how did you get on the recruitment team? We didn't even know they had one. Well, that's the thing. Why didn't you know? It was on the website. So sometimes you have to do your due diligence too, to put yourself out there so that you can be recognized, and just from being on that recruitment team, believe it or not, I met so many people in the organization just because of that one, getting into that one opportunity. So sometimes you just have to put yourself out there so you can be where people can notice you. Because like I said, sometimes you want your name to be mentioned in rooms that you're not
Yeah.
there. But in order for that to happen, you also have to have put yourself out there, so to speak, so people will recognize you. They will notice you in some way. Oh, well, she's the person. If you want to get a project done and get it done on time, that's the person you want to call. See,
Yeah.
those are the types of things, you want to make sure that they're noticing you for your talents, your gifts, your
Mm,
abilities. Yeah.
I love that. Something else that Anna touched on was that small changes create personal transformation.
Mm-hmm.
Anna's ACT framework was alter your environment, change what you consume, try something you once loved. And it demonstrates that rediscovering oneself does not require dramatic reinvention. Often it begins with just little small acts that reconnect people to curiosity and creativity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I remember when we did the podcast interview, you told me how push ups were used to help you get physically fit, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
That you would be punished and you had to do push-ups and you got stronger and stronger, and you then realized the reason why you were
Exactly.
doing push-ups. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, one of the things that the push-ups was a part of the physical fitness test at the end of the cycle when you were in basic training. And you had to be able to do a certain amount of push-ups based on, your age. And if you didn't, because there were several areas, but the push-up was like they had sit-ups, and of course you had to do a run. But the push-ups they felt were the one thing that they needed to help us with, as I said, because most of us didn't go in the military with a lot of upper body strength. I mean, we weren't doing pull-ups, even if you were going to the gym. Most of the females went to the gym to do aerobics. A lot of us didn't even do the weightlifting and all of that. I mean, you may have some that did, but most females don't worry about the weightlifting part of it. They go and they do the aerobics, they may do spin class, whatever. So you don't have that upper body strength. But they knew that they needed to do something to make sure that you were strong enough to be able to pass at the end of that cycle. So what better way to do that? You're going to always mess up. If you're not standing in line properly, if they tell you to you have a certain amount of time to get something done and you don't finish it on time, that's push up. Whatever it was, that's what they used to discipline you by
Yeah.
making you do push-ups. And like I said, once I realized that, yes, it was a form of punishment, but not really. It was actually preparation. And if you could see it like that, then it
Yes.
took on a different perspective, a new meaning. Like,
Mhm.
wow, they're not trying to hurt me. They're actually trying to help me,
Yeah.
It's not, so you don't look at it as though I want to go home. I don't want to be here doing all these push-ups. I'm ready to go home. But it's
Wow.
because you knew at least I did anyway. I figured out at that point, okay, I really need to learn how to do these push-ups because I need that upper body strength. And once you figured that out, then it made life a little easier too.
Now, our childhood traits often reveal our life purpose.
Mhm.
My story of being punished by this nun for asking questions, it illustrates how early experiences can either suppress
Sure.
or, push your natural talents out.
Yeah.
Yet those same traits of curiosity, questioning, storytelling later became the foundation for my global speaking and storytelling work.
Mhm.
Your mother must have seen your leadership skills much, much earlier than you realized.
And I think she did, to be honest with you. I think you're absolutely correct about that because she was always, um, if I was sitting at the table or something doing my homework, one of the things she always said, sit up straight, speak clearly. If someone's talking to you, look them straight in the eye, and if she never it was one of those things I remember too, coming home from school one day, and I was telling her I was very upset because one of the young ladies who I thought, we were friends, but you know how kids are. Once she got with another little group of girls, and then all of a sudden she wanted to call herself teasing me about something. And I went home because I was really hurt by that because I thought, okay, I thought we were really good friends, and she did that. And, you know, one of the things that my mother said to me, she says, we all will have people that we like, we admire, and, that you may want to put on a pedestal at some point. She said, but never, ever feel like anyone's light shines brighter than yours. And
Mhm.
she just always had, these things that she used to say and ways she used to say it, and even the way she used to do things that I think that was what the leader brought that leadership out. I didn't realize it before I went into the military, because I think I was still a little girlish, bougie and all of that. But at some point it came out because of what she did when I told her I lost that scholarship. She didn't argue with me. She didn't yell. She didn't, like I said, she didn't negotiate. She just calmly said, you are going to finish college and I'll give you 6 months to do it. And she did it like that because she knew that that for me at that point, that was the best way to do it. I think that's why she did it like that. Mm-hmm.
Now, the world often tries to silence authentic voices. Many people are told they're too loud, they're too curious, too opinionated. I try and use this message to reframe this criticism. The traits others try to silence may actually be that person's life purpose waiting to be activated. And for me, it was activated through a beating. Now, you've created the CAN leadership model: confidence, assertiveness, and network. Which of these do you think women struggle with the most in the workplace, and why?
Confidence. Because it's so easy to not say anything when you're in a meeting. One of the things that used to just really, really get me so upset when we would have a meeting and the ladies would come in and they all you look around and they are all sitting in the back. Why are you back there? Do you not have an opinion? Is there nothing that you want to share? I would sometimes go, okay, come on, you need to come up front here. But that's one of the things. Why you don't walk into a room and take the back seat? Go up front so that you can let your presence be known. Because if there is a question and you raise your hand, a lot of times from the back, they will probably ignore you, may not even see you back there to get your opinion about something. But if you're sitting right up front in their face, then yes, I have a question, something I would like to say, and speak up. That's why I say it's the confidence. I think out of all the traits that we as women possess, it's always the confidence one that I think a lot of us struggle with, to be able to have that confidence, to know that when you walk into a room or when you're standing up speaking on a stage or training or teaching or what have you, it's because you have that skill, you have that ability, you have that knowledge, and don't let anybody second guess you to make you think that you don't know what you know.
Yeah. Yeah, when one woman speaks, others find courage. When women share their stories publicly, something transformative happens, not just to them, but to the others in the room as well. And people realize that they're not alone.
Yes.
And collective courage begins to grow when you see those role models, right?
Absolutely. That's why I say, if there's someone, if you're in an organization, on a job, what have you, if there is someone that's doing something that that you aspire to do, meet that person. Even send them some a note and ask them, can you take them to lunch or something? But you want to associate with those people. Put yourself in a position to know those people that will be the ones that will not only be able to give you some important guidance, but also be the person sitting in the room to, like I say, mention your name when you're not in that room.
Something Anna said about feeling lost is often a signal of growth. Many women attending her retreats believe that they're lost during the major life transitions, but Anna reframed the experience. She said that they're not lost, they were outgrowing the environment that once shaped their identity. Now, you said that many women were not asking for advice, but asking for permission to lead. How can women begin giving themselves that permission instead of waiting for it from others?
And again, that's where the confidence and the assertiveness part comes in. And that's where seeing others speak up, when you see, like you said, when you see others speaking up, then you feel that you could do the same thing. Because a lot of times some feel that, well, maybe my voice is not that important. But yes, it is important, because you can contribute. You have a lot to say. Uh, you're here for a reason. So obviously you have some value. What you have to say, what you do, the way you do these things, all that is of value. And a lot of times they don't think that, oh, well, maybe what I have to say is not that important. Nobody might not want to hear. Well, you don't know that until you say it. But if you keep saying to yourself, I'm not that important, or what I have to say is not that important, then that's the way you're going to continually feel. And those are the traits that you need to break out of, those self-limiting beliefs is what I call them.
And it becomes your reality.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much for coming online and sharing your incredible story with us.
Thank you for
It's
having
when
me.
we have these role models where women can see what leadership looks like, women can actually believe that they can do the same. And now
Yeah.
you're empowering, you're coaching, you're supporting women to step into those shoes. Thank you
Yeah.
for your work.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And I just love this platform of having women share their story. It's great.
It's an absolute pleasure. And thank you to everybody who's tuned in. We'll be back again this evening with our UK, Europe, and African speakers. So tune in at 7:30 p.m. Australian time, which will be first thing in the morning in the United Kingdom. Bye for now, everybody. And thank you again, Dr. Lewis.
Thank you. Bye-bye.